Podcast City Network.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 152 of the Nest Podcast. I'm Brandon, joined as always by my co-host, Zach. Zach, did you have a good 4th of July, my man?
I definitely did. Yeah, it was enjoyable. How about you?
Yeah, it was good. We contributed to the noise pollution of our neighborhood by buying a lot of fireworks and exploding them and all that stuff. My wife has a friend here in town visiting from California, and it's highly illegal to shoot off fireworks in that state. So she was excited to get to actually be in a state where that is legal. But we've got a lot to talk about. You know, there have been weeks doing this show, especially during the pandemic when we didn't even have live sports and all that, when we didn't really have much to talk about, but we still somehow seemed to Frankenstein together a show. Well, this week we've had a ton of stuff happen in the world of sports. So we have a lot to get into. We've got the Trevor Bauer accusations of sexual assault. We've got the college kids now getting paid, and an Olympian that has touched the vein in America for a very polarizing topic. And I'm excited to get into all of that. Let's start off with the Trevor Bauer accusations. You know, this is something that came up during the course of last week and into all throughout this week, where one of the biggest names in the game kind of was thrown under the bus and has a huge spotlight put on him right now. For those that don't know, Trevor Bauer is the reigning National League Cy Young Award winner, meaning that he was the best pitcher in the National League for 2020. And in the offseason, Bauer signed a deal with the LA Dodgers that would net him $40 million this year and another $60 million over the next 2 seasons. So dude's getting paid big bucks. Well, the news that came out is that, you know, he hooked up with this girl that he met online, and then they proceeded to have consensual rough sex, according to the text message threads that have been going out. But he's being alleged to have taken things too far with this woman and doing some things that she didn't agree to initially. What have you heard about this story, and what do you think about it all coming down right now for the Dodgers and for Trevor Bauer?
That's pretty much the extent I've heard. I guess there had been some pictures of the victim that were released showing some injuries, I guess, to her face. And yeah, it's an interesting thing to have happen to him at this moment in time. Obviously, you mentioned that he has a huge contract, and if he didn't miss a start last year, he played 12 games. So in 12 games, he was able to obviously win the Cy Young and then get this gigantic contract. And then, of course, all the sticky stuff kind of came out, and we've been over that. And now this comes out. And the old saying goes, you know, innocent until proven guilty. But it seems like with these things, you know, concerning sexual assault, that these guys are usually vilified and guilty well before they even enter a courtroom. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I definitely expected him to make his start over the weekend, and MLB did come out and say that they were going to, I don't know, whatever they called it.
Administrative leave. He's on a 7-day administrative leave period. Manfred kind of invoked that. And now the Dodgers are also doing their own investigation into the issue. But yeah, you mentioned the administrative leave. that basically puts him on leave for 7 days so that MLB can look into things and determine if it needs to be a longer suspension or if he's going to be allowed to play. So within the next 3 or 4 days, we'll probably find out something about the Bauer situation. It is kind of interesting that Bauer has also had a bit of a reputation in Major League Baseball as kind of being that eccentric dude on the field that's kind of rubbed corporate MLB the wrong way. So I wonder if this will also play into some sort of way that they can take that out on him because of the fact that, they don't like each other.
Right.
Manfred doesn't like him. Jim, what's up, man? I'm glad that you're watching. Glad that you're in the show. That's the Godfather from one of the NFL Trash Talk groups. And Godfather's out there. He said he shared the post with his new group. So we appreciate that. We appreciate all those guys tuning in. Make sure you like the page and follow us weekly for updates. Right now, we're talking about the Trevor Bauer situation, but we've also got some more stuff coming up. Like Zach is going to have his own team in the NFL. Finally, after 3 years of doing a sports podcast, he's finally going to have an NFL team to call his own. And we are eliminating 4 of the final 8 AFC teams remaining tonight. So stick around for that later on. Zach, I'm sure you've heard about the NIL, which is the name and image likeness thing that just passed in NCAA. So now the student athletes are going to be able to get paid. What do you think of that?
I think it's about damn time.
Yeah,
there had been, talks about this for a little while now, and I guess they eventually decided to roll that out. And last Thursday, I believe, was the first official day of that start. And I guess I would assume I haven't heard any big names signing with anything or whatever yet, but I would assume they're starting to roll out. I did see that Barstool has started their own, I don't know what you'd call it, agency or whatever for college athletes, and they're accepting athletes and stuff like that. So I think you could see stuff like that. I think you could see, the big podcast people like Barstool and other stuff like that kind of just do that, and they bring on athletes into their network or whatever, and obviously they can have them on podcasts and they can have them do videos and stuff and pay them or whatever they want to do, and then just build their brand that way with their following. So I'm interested to see exactly how this all plays out. You got to think that not everybody's going to get paid. The kicker from Iowa State is not going to get any kind of call, but the big quarterbacks from the SEC and a lot of players from Bama and stuff like that are probably going to get a lot of numbers thrown their way. And I guess we'll see how everyone handles it.
And you know what? I was thinking about that earlier today, how this is all set up so that these players are going to get paid based off of endorsements, essentially. And I was thinking about it, like the impacts that it's going to have on recruiting and stuff like that. Because obviously, to use your example, Alabama's players are going to have much more attention and focus than Iowa's would, because they are in the SEC. They are defending national champions. They are one of the perennial powerhouse NCAA football teams. So yeah, they are going to attract a better player. A better player is already going to come with more notoriety, more fame, if you will, on Instagram, on TikTok, or however they're marketing themselves. That's just going to add to the fact that they're going to be able to make more money. Now, that might not be fair if you're that Iowa kid, but if you're that Alabama kid that's been working their tail off and they're a better talent, why wouldn't they get more popularity? It's just, it is what it is.
Right. That's just business. And
it is. And you can't get mad at it because, they are going to be on TV more. And yeah, that will be a recruiting tactic that's kind of borderline, because they put in the language that it's not supposed to have, the school itself is not supposed to have any influence on getting more endorsements and stuff like that, or promising more endorsements on the recruiting trail. So it is going to be interesting to see how they navigate those waters, because it could definitely get murky. But if they're able to segue this into funneling all of the best players into these SECs, into the ACCs and stuff like that, you may see some of these smaller conferences eventually split off, and then they have their own programs, their own deals going on.
Right. And I definitely think that like the top recruits will obviously still go to those big schools, because I don't think that the endorsements come from those schools specifically. Although
They don't.
in the case of Bama, if you're a Bama player, that already means that you're good. So they probably have a better interest in Bama players versus any other school. But if you are a 5-star recruit or whatever, and you end up going to a lesser known school, and you have some sort of following or people know about you, then I'm sure you'll get some sort of stuff thrown your way. I am curious to see how it all is handled by the players, because we're talking about 18-year-olds, we're talking about 22-year-olds. And if somebody is a real huge recruit and they sign early because they get promised 6 figures a year or whatever, and it doesn't turn out that way because they're mismanaged or whatever, they get conned. It's going to be pretty interesting to kind of watch that stuff unfold, to see, who screws up what, when, because I'm sure there's contracts out there that are not going to be good for a player in the long term. You know what I mean? Like, these people potentially could offer them the world and say, we're going to pay you 6 figures for all 4 years of college. And then on the back end, when you make it to the NFL, you're going to owe us X amount of money or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of room for, stuff like that.
Didn't Tatis Jr. sign some sort of deal before he made his millions where he borrowed money essentially, and he had to pay back a lot of it when he did finally get paid?
That's right. I don't know the specifics of it, but I know that someone basically sponsored him and paid for his I would assume his high school years to play travel ball or whatever it might be in his country, and then eventually to move to the US and get set up and all that stuff. And I'm sure they paid for his housing during minor leagues and all that stuff. And then, yeah, I think he owes them a significant amount of money, like in the millions. And yeah, I mean, if that works for you, that's great, but it's going to be kind of like a used car salesman type deal. Like, there's deals out there to be made, but you can also get screwed over. So hopefully the players are mindful enough to be aware of that.
Well, what a time to be like a sports agent or somebody that would represent the best interest of these players. You could step in and basically build your clientele from the college level. And these new agents are probably going to be those type of people that are going to surpass some of these mega house professional agents, like the ones that we all know, the Billy Beans, the Scott Boras, those type guys that are front office type guys that are almost every day, or every house knowledge knows those names. Maybe some kid in college is now going to be able to segue that into a future for himself. So not only did the NIL make it something to where the players can get paid based off of their ability and their fame that they're getting for themselves and the recognition that they're bringing to their schools, now that opens up more jobs in the sports agent world and things like that, sports representatives. And I think it's nothing good. It's nothing but good, because it's going to continue to grow sports. It's going to continue to grow the various games and the various positions that are available.
Yeah, for sure. And finally, a chunk of the pie, if it's not even if it's coming from the colleges themselves, but at least the players are getting a piece
share
of the pie when it comes to all of that revenue that college sports and in particular college football makes. And they've just been getting their scholarship and being expected to play a professional level sport, if you're being honest about it. I mean, these, especially in the SEC, I mean, those guys are one level above or below the NFL. So
yeah,
people like to tout student athlete and their students first and this and that and the other. But if you ever talk to one of those guys, it's a full-time job to be on a Division I, just one of those big schools. It's a tough job because there's so many kids that are super talented. You have to fight for a spot.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. To that point, it's no wonder that a lot of these guys get a little bit of help when it comes to the academic side of things, because their sports side of college life is so rigorous and so tough. So the jokes and making fun of these guys for being dumb or whatever, they're just overworked and they haven't been getting paid for it ever until now. Right. So I'm excited to see what happens, where it goes. You actually texted me something funny, and you're like, has Dabo submitted his resignation yet? Because famously, he was saying that if kids were getting paid to play college sports, he didn't want to be part of it. Technically, kids aren't getting paid to play college sports. They're getting paid off of their name and image for being a college sport athlete, for being someone of interest that happens to also be a college sport athlete. They're not getting paid from the colleges. They're not getting paid from a sanctioned NCAA affiliation. They're getting paid based off what they're actually doing in their lives. And I'm for it. I wish people would sponsor us and give us lots of money for what we're doing in the sports world. But you know what? We'll let them have their time to shine. Sha'Carri Richardson. This has been a pretty hot topic issue for the past few days on social media, on the internet, among talking heads all over the place, on all the different networks. But Zach, what do you think about the world's fastest woman? Let's call her that. Someone who just scorched the Olympic trials in Oregon with a 10.86 100-meter final. That's almost 10 meters per second. That's insane how fast she's moving. And she's not going to be able to participate in the Olympics because she got high. Right. What do you think about that? We were talking a little bit about it before we went live, but I want to pick your brain here on the air. Should she be able to run?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you'll be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't agree with that. My personal take on it is that the Olympics are behind the times when it comes to something like this. You've seen a lot of the major league sports, at least in America. We're talking NFL, MLB, NBA. I'm not sure about NHL, but a lot of those big names have come out and just flat out stopped testing for marijuana in any aspect. And I think that makes sense. When you look at it, that's not necessarily a drug that is performance enhancing, especially for someone who sprints, does 100 meters. I can't imagine that would help her in any fashion. So this is just one of those old, outdated rules that we have yet to be able to change. And here we are, dealing with it. And obviously she's dealing with it and she won't be able to go out to the Olympics. I don't know when that's going to change. I have no idea. The Olympics, I'm sure, are a huge governing body and they seem pretty kind of old school. So it sucks. And it sucks to see somebody so talented be, kept away from their skill for something so trivial. I mean, there's not that many people out there that care about weed anymore. And if they do, I don't know. I don't see how this affects anything. You know what I mean? Like I said, this cannot help her at all.
I agree. It's not a performance enhancing drug, especially for a sprinter. If anything, you would think smoking would be worse for the lungs and therefore be a detriment to her skills and abilities.
Right.
But needless to say, it's not performance enhancing. It's not going to make her better at it. I don't get it. We were talking before we went on live. It would be perfectly fine if she was able to go and have several beers and then the next day go and run a 10.86. It would be no problem. But because she smoked weed, I get it. Rules are rules. A lot of us, if we got high or whatever, and then our jobs drug tested us, we might not be employed any longer. So I get it. Rules are rules. If you break those rules willingly, then, there should be some sort of punishment, but she's not employed by anybody really. The Olympics isn't going to pay her a lot of money to be an Olympic athlete. She's going to get paid off of what? Name and image likeness on the back end. So I don't think any of these sponsors potentially would be upset with her for smoking weed. I don't think it's anything that should ban her from the Olympics because it's not that performance enhancing. She's not getting paid to be there anyway. She's just the fastest woman on the planet. And you're saying no. Maybe because she does her hair like Dennis Rodman, who knows? But it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. It's a rule. And if you want to be involved in some sort of organization, you have to follow their rules. But that doesn't mean that the rule isn't stupid.
No, I agree.
I think it should be changed, and it should have been changed a while ago. And there's nothing we can do about that. So I guess my advice to people would be, yeah, you should probably follow the rules, but we should also try to change stupid rules.
Yeah, if it's a rule that is just there because it's an archaic thing in our country and it stems back to, decades ago when people didn't know what they were doing and were afraid of every little thing, then sure, why not? Let's get rid of that. Let's use some common sense here. It is what it is. But as of now, Sha'Carri's not going to be participating in the Olympics, and I'm not going to be caring about that event in the Olympics.
No.
That's all there is to it.
And I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. I don't think anyone's going to care about the sprint. I mean, that's the only real reason a lot of people tune into these kind of things. When Michael Phelps was swimming, everyone was tuning in to see him get another gold medal.
Yep.
There's those certain athletes that bring a lot of viewership to the Olympics, and when they're not there, you're not going to care about that sport. And I can't even think of one athlete that I'm really interested in watching in the Olympics.
Yeah, so. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Like you said, there have been some throughout the years that were must see, and Sha'Carri Richardson was getting to be that athlete that everybody had to see. And I think this situation is only going to make it better for her in the future, because now she's more must see. More people know about her and want to know what's going on with her. She may not be in the Olympics this year, but I guarantee she walks away from this with a monster weed deal from like Snoop Dogg or Dr. Dre or Mike Tyson, one of these guys that have a big weed, something to do within the weed industry, right. Farms or product lines or whatever. I think they're going to give her big sponsorships. I think she's going to get sponsorships from all kinds of these cool things that are out there on Instagram and all that stuff, because I'm sure her following has gone through the roof. I wish I had a before and after of her Twitter follows, because I'm sure it's jumped up by a ton in the past 4 days.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing posts about her saying she's the fastest woman alive and she's from America. Great. That's awesome. I can't wait to see her kick ass in the Olympics. And then this stuff broke out and it's just skyrocketed ever since.
Yeah. It's like, oh, cool. She's going to be awesome in the Olympics. Oh, she's not going to be in the Olympics. Now I'm even more interested in it.
Right.
In the world we live in, I'm surprised people aren't canceling the Olympics. Yeah, I mean, it may come to that, Roger, that people are going to be outraged. People are going to be upset over this. I could definitely see at least a boycott of the Olympics from a lot of people. I don't know if it'll be one of those things where people are out actively boycotting it or just trying to do their silent protest of not watching, like people tried to do with the NFL. It is what it is. I won't be interested in it, but if the Olympics are on and I happen to be flipping through the channels, I might stop and watch it. I'm not outright boycotting the Olympics.
Yeah. I mean, I won't be super interested in it, but it's always at least somewhat interesting to see the Olympics, simply because they come around every 4 years. The season comes every 4 years.
Yep.
And it's, I guess, a big deal. But yeah, it won't be a huge draw this year, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think it will either. It'll probably be one of the lowest rated Olympics, but it is what it is. Zach, we're heading into the All-Star break for Major League Baseball soon. I know the Boston Red Sox, they set a league high this year for having the most All-Stars, so I'm pretty stoked about that. Rafael Devers and Xander Bogaerts, I told you last week, they're going to be starters. They're going to be the first tandem in Major League Baseball since 2009, for when Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez did it, when they were the shortstop and third base representative at the All-Star game. First time since then, Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers. Super stoked to have them both being the starters in the All-Star game. But they've added 3 more players from the Red Sox that are going to be All-Stars. JD Martinez is going to come off the bench as a DH, and then we're going to have Nathan Eovaldi and Matt Barnes as pitchers in the All-Star game. Do the Cardinals have any?
They do. Obviously, Arenado is going to be in there. I believe Yachty's going to be the backup to Buster Posey. Who knows if they'll play him or not. And
okay.
Alex Reyes, pitcher, is going to be in that bullpen-esque rotation or whatever they're going to do with that.
Right on. Yeah, that's cool. They'll probably give the starter 2 innings, and then they change him out pretty frequently throughout the rest of the game to try to give as many guys a chance to pitch as they can, which, it's always cool. You get to see one of the guys from your team come out there. Maybe he's a starting pitcher, but he's pitching in the 4th inning or whatever, but it is what it is. You get to see him come out there and throw some pitches and have a good time representing your team and your city. it's been kind of a cool year for the Red Sox. They are now they have the best record in the American League, first place in the American League East, and they've kind of been cruising. They're 9-1 in the last 10 games. So they've been kicking butt. If you're watching live, you can see at the bottom of the screen we've got our MLB power rankings going across the bottom, and I've got the Boston Red Sox as the number one team right now. Not just because they're my team. If you watch on a regular basis, you'll see that they drop off sometimes out of the entire top 5. But the fact that they've gone 9-1 in the past 10 games, they've had 2 sweeps back to back of the New York Yankees. They are a hot team. They've got good pitching. Like I said, they've got a league high 5 players as all-stars. Boston Red Sox are the truth, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah. There's no doubt about that. That team is I think exceeding everyone's expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, even Red Sox fans. I think at the beginning of the season, even Red Sox fans that thought everything was going to go well had their doubts simply because Chris Sale wasn't available. They didn't know what the pitching staff was going to be like. And you said it time and time again. They've came and they've done their job, and obviously the offense is there to get them all the runs that they need. So this team is insanely hot, and it's interesting to see at this point in the season that the Giants and the Red Sox are the first to 50 wins. I never expected that, and I don't think many people did. So hats off to the Red Sox. They're absolutely killing it.
Yeah, I've been pretty excited about it. Are the Cardinals still kind of floundering around?
Yes, they sure as hell are. You mentioned, I remember a couple weeks ago I mentioned that we were going to have a couple of pretty easy series coming our way.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it as being must-win games if you're going to be relevant at the end of the season.
Yeah, and they weren't able to do that. The only series they won was against the Diamondbacks, and they just finished up a 4-game series against the Rockies and only won 1 game.
Wow.
And I mean, they lost 3-2. I mean, real close games where they just couldn't get any offense going. And if you know anything about the Rockies, they don't have the greatest pitching staff, and we did not face Herman Marquez, so we didn't even face their biggest guys, and we weren't able to get it done. I don't know. This team has some bad issues, and now we're facing the Giants, who are a very good team. So I think it's just going to be more of the same for a while. I'm honestly shocked that we haven't seen a change in the coaching staff in any aspect. I mean, they haven't done anything with anybody, and it's getting to that point to where, what are you guys doing? Are we even trying? I mean, clearly the product you're putting out there is not working. So I don't know. It sucks right now. And I definitely did not expect this either. I expected them to at least be number 2 in the NL Central, but it's not happening.
Yeah, I know we both had the Cardinals as our favorite to win the NL Central, but it's just not looking very good for the Cardinals this year. And it sucks that your MLB team is fading. It sucks that they're not most likely going to be around in September unless they get on a serious hot streak between now and then. But one thing is good is you'll have a new NFL team to cheer for, and hopefully you'll get to experience the playoffs one way or another. And this week we're moving into the Sweet 16 and the 8 teams remaining from the AFC side of the board. And what's pretty interesting about this is you have the Buffalo Bills, which they're the highest seed that you have remaining as a 2 seed, but the next highest seed is all the way down to number 9 at the Miami Dolphins. So you eliminated a lot of the top seeds last week. So I'm excited to see what comes out of the AFC side of this board, because it's definitely interesting. But you've got some good young talent at the bottom of this AFC that, they could turn it all around and eventually be a juggernaut. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's see who we are going to eliminate this week. And I think you're going to be pretty happy with some of the questions that we came up with this week. We're trying to keep it fresh and changing up some things so that we don't continue to get the same questions over and over again. So we've added some new ones to the list this week. We'll get into those in a moment. But Zach, the first matchup that we have is the number 2 Buffalo Bills versus the number 16 Houston Astros. Now, Houston Astros. I meant Houston Texans.
Nice. Got
Yeah.
baseball in the brain.
Yeah. Baseball on the brain. It is what it is. That's supposed to be the Houston Texans. So they're the 16 seed that eliminated the number 1 Kansas City Chiefs last week.
Right.
So if you're sitting here thinking about it in your own head, Zach, which team do you think you would rather go for?
I'd say Bills. I mean, they're a hot team. They've got a lot of good players, and they're great. Yeah, I mean, they ran all the way to the AFC Championship last year. Couldn't get past the Chiefs, and I think they're a good team nonetheless. So yeah, obviously the Bills are a lot easier to root for, I think, than the Texans. The Texans organization as a whole is just a dumpster fire.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd time to declare yourself a Houston Texans fan anyway.
Yeah, right.
They just had the sell-off of all their good players. Deshaun wants out of town. He's got his whole issue. We talked about Bauer's allegations at the beginning of the show. He's got his own demons that are coming out of the closet. Yeah. So kind of a weird time to jump on that bandwagon, but also it's kind of a weird one to jump on the Buffalo Bills. This is the year after they just won the AFC East for the first time in forever. And if you're jumping on their team's bandwagon now, it's like, oh, look at this Johnny come lately. So we'll see what happens. Right. Let's go ahead and go to our board and pick the question that is going to help us narrow down who it's going to be between the Bills and the Texans. So we got the wheel spinning, and it is your choice. So you actually get a chance to pick first thing which one of these teams you want to advance and what bandwagon you would be comfortable jumping on.
That's an easy choice. I basically just gave it the Bills. I mean, they're a good team, and they have the ability to be a good team for a while now.
Yep.
I think the only thing that's going to kind of hinder them is the Patriots are kind of getting up in that mix again. Obviously last year, no one really counted them in the runnings for anything really. And now that they've kind of made some moves, they've got a new young quarterback. They might be able to give the Bills a run for their money. But yeah, especially up against the Texans, that's a no-brainer.
Yep, I agree so much. And, Josh Allen he's one of the quarterbacks of the future for sure. And they just have a good all-around team. Stephon Diggs really added to that offense last year. And they were my defense in fantasy last year and took me to a championship. So I can't say enough good things about the Buffalo Bills. But let's move on to the next tier of our bracket. And we have the number 9 Miami Dolphins versus the number 14 Cincinnati Bengals.
Nice.
So whenever you see these two teams pitted up against each other, which way do you initially want to lean? You've got two young offenses that have two of the premier quarterbacks drafted in recent years in Joe Burrow and in Tua. So you've got the future right there in your quarterback. You've got an exciting offense on both teams. The defense is a question mark. The offensive lines are a question mark. They're kind of the same team if you look at it in that regard.
Yeah, they do have very, very big similarities. They've both kind of been down in the bottom for a long time. They've been able to draft some pretty good players simply because they're on that number 1 pick list for a while. But at first glance, I think I'd start to lean towards the Dolphins.
You said last week that was a team that you sort of had some feelings for growing up,
right?
So
I think the Bengals organization is another one like the Texans that's just not a good organization. And hopefully Joe Burrow doesn't waste his career there in Cincinnati and not be able to do anything. So, yeah, my first leaning is towards the Dolphins.
Yep. Okay. I mean, I can see that. I can see, getting behind Tua and his abilities. So let's see what the question is. It's going to help us determine who it's going to be. All right. So this is one of our new questions. It's called Newbie. And this essentially is who is the better new quarterback of these two teams. So we kind of talked about it before we spun the wheel a little bit, but we've got Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa. Which of these two quarterbacks do you think has the brighter future? Which one of these two do you think will have more MVP awards, have a better chance of making the Hall of Fame, have a better career overall? Which guy you got?
That's an interesting one. I I think Tua probably doesn't have as long of a career as Joe Burrow, simply because he's a mobile guy, and mobile guys tend to get hurt. They tend to get, some sort of knee injury that puts them out for an entire year, and then they're never the same or whatever. But at that same point, Joe Burrow's coming off of a pretty significant injury that he sustained on his rookie year. So they both have a history of injury. They're both playing for not great teams that we mentioned, not great offensive lines, and that's not going to be good for them as a whole. Boy, this is a difficult one. I want to lean towards Joe Burrow having the potential for a better career simply because he's more of a traditional passer type. And I mean, at least from his rookie year, what he was able to show was he was good. He was damn good before his injury.
And added Jamar Chase in the draft, so another weapon for that offense.
Right. I'm interested to see what it's going to be like this next year. Obviously he came off that injury. I'm sure he's fully rehabbed and everything. So that should be okay. But now teams have tape on him, and now teams know what he likes to do. They know his tendencies. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be very interesting with both of these quarterbacks. I really don't know where to lean to. What are your thoughts?
I agree with your assessment. I think the early examples that we've seen of Joe Burrow and Tua, I give the slight nod to Joe Burrow. I think he's probably the better traditional quarterback. I know he's had his injury woes, and he had to kind of split time with Ryan Fitzpatrick, which that's another, I guess kind of a knock, is the fact that he had to rely on Fitzpatrick to come in and save him in games whenever things went off the rails. So Joe didn't have that. He didn't have that security blanket in Fitzpatrick last year, and he was out there balling. You give him another weapon. I know the Dolphins got Waddle from Alabama, and that's another huge weapon for Tua. But I like Joe Burrow and that LSU connection to Jamar Chase. I like T. Higgins. I like Tyler Boyd. I like his future if he can keep those young wide receivers on his team and everybody stays healthy. I think that's the team that's going to ultimately be better, and I think Joe Burrow is ultimately going to be the better quarterback.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you ultimately. I can see Tua having a similar career to Marcus Mariota. In his first year, He's got talent. He's young, and he can run, and he's agile, and he can do that kind of stuff. But once the league figures him out, I think they're going to pass him by. I don't see him being a guy that's going to stick around for 10, 15 years. And plus, he's got a huge injury behind him already with that hip injury. So
yep.
He's not, fully 100% good to go. And I can see Joe Burrow lasting longer and performing better. So, yeah, I guess Cincinnati Bengals move on.
Cincinnati Bengals moving on with Joe Burrow as the likely, in our opinions, better quarterback in the course of his career. So that was an interesting question. I'm glad we got one of those new ones in there, and it's a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about the stars of the game and to reassess things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Moving on, the next tier up in our bracket is the number 10 Jacksonville Jaguars versus the number 13 Denver Broncos. And this is an interesting matchup as well, because on this one, you've got the guy who's been declared the next best thing for college or for professional football in Trevor Lawrence coming from college versus a team that's kind of been struggling to find an identity. Looking at this, where are you leaning initially? Which way do you think you're going to tend to go?
I wish I could give this answer closer to the start of the season, because if the Broncos make a move and get some veteran quarterback like maybe an Aaron Rodgers or something, that changes the game a little bit. But as it stands currently,
Drew Lock is the quarterback of the Denver Broncos as it stands.
That's not going to do much for you. And I'm definitely more interested in seeing what Trevor Lawrence can do. So as it stands today, I'd say the Jags have the advantage.
Okay. So as of now, you're leaning Jags. Of course, which way I have to lean by default. And that's with the guy who's touted as the next best thing for professional football, Trevor Lawrence and Duval here in Jacksonville, Florida. So let's go to the wheel and see what happens. There are some choices that could take it out of our hands. Okay. rock and roll. This is another one of the new questions that we came up with for this week. And Zach, this question is, let's see here. Kiss came up with the phrase, I want to rock and roll all night. So in honor of that, what city would you like to party in with your favorite rock band? Jacksonville or Denver? So first off, who's your favorite band that you're going to be partying with?
Let's say Led Zeppelin.
Oh, okay. Led Zeppelin. You want to party with the guys from Led Zepp, and you could either do it in Jacksonville, Florida, or you could do it in Denver, Colorado. Which one you picking?
Interesting. Denver has never struck me as a party city. Me and my wife went there in 2019 and spent some time in the city, and it's a cool place. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it doesn't have the party vibe.
They are, to interrupt you, they are also now known as being the leaders of like the drug movements. So if you wanted to smoke weed or trip mushrooms with your favorite band, that would be a place that you could do it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. What are your thoughts on the party scene in Jacksonville?
Well, I mean, we said it for the past 2 weeks, pretty much anywhere in Florida where there's beaches and things like that, you're going to have a pretty good party. Every year for the Florida and Georgia game, they have the Gator Bowl down in Jacksonville, Florida, where it's a huge tailgating event for the entire weekend for the Florida-Georgia game. So it is a party city. They're known for having a lot of big things going on, a lot of festivals and all that. So, yeah, it's Florida party.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just don't see Colorado as being that kind of place, even though they have legal weed and legal this and that. It just seems like a more cool place. Like you go to Colorado to see the mountains and go hiking and, and that kind of stuff. You don't go to party.
You think you're going to party down in Duval then? I
think so. Yeah.
Wow. Jags moving on in this. That's pretty interesting to see where they're going to end up, because now, they just punched their ticket to the Elite Eight in this bracket. That's right. So the Jacksonville Jags have a pretty good chance of becoming your favorite team. That would be wild to see. All right, last up for you on this side of the bracket, in this part of the Sweet 16, we have the number 11 Las Vegas Raiders versus the number 12 New England Patriots. And you know which way I lean on this one, so I'm going to default to you to see which way you think you're leaning.
I think the Patriots are a hard team to like simply because there's such a huge stigma behind the Patriots. You get labeled as a bandwagon fan, you get labeled as a cheater and all this kind of crap and blah, 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 blah. So I think it'd be kind of hard to be a Patriots fan, especially from a guy who has no ties to that area, who never really cared about them growing up or anything. And I mean, honestly, the same can be said about the Raiders. They have some wild, crazy fans. They're not a great team by any means. And I think it would be kind of difficult to root for both of these in their own specific ways.
Well, I do want to try to argue a little bit on behalf of the Patriots. I agree. It would be a hard look to become a Las Vegas Raiders fan right now. But for them, I've got some pros into that as well. The New England Patriots, they're coming off a bad year. They're coming off a year where it was down. It was very bad. It was hard to be a fan. So jumping on the bandwagon now would show like, hey, at least he didn't join when they were at their high. Right. You can always claim that you're getting on for the Mac Jones bandwagon and be like, hey, I missed out on Brady. I was wrong once in my life. I'm not going to let it happen twice.
Right.
So there's that. With the Raiders, you can be like, hey, I didn't like them when they were in Oakland, but I really do like going to Las Vegas. So if I'm going to go to Las Vegas and cheer for anybody, I might as well make it my team so that I can really get invested.
All right, there you go. Well,
but I don't know if you're a Vegas guy though. So
I'm not. We'll see what Neil has to say.
Twitter followers. So the choice is pretty much out of your hands on this one, because we're going to go based off of statistics. And it looks like the Las Vegas Raiders have 1.7 million followers. It's quite a lot.
Not as many as the Patriots.
Do you think the Patriots have more?
Guaranteed.
The New England Patriots have 4.5 million followers on Twitter, and maybe they're getting one more in Mr. Zach Billings because the New England Patriots are moving on to the next round, and I'm stoked about it. Let's go.
That's funny.
You're gonna be
I like the Twitter followers one because it shows you, the level of, I don't know what you'd call it, the level of interest, I guess, because it's not all fans that follow the Patriots. The level of interest in teams versus other teams. Only 1 million people care enough about the Raiders to follow them, whereas 4 million people care enough about the Patriots to follow them.
That just speaks to that New England sports market being such a rabid fan base for all of their teams.
Yeah.
Following the Red Sox Twitter, I get into conversations with people all the time. I see all kinds of people that are in the media game that are actively out there tweeting every little thing that happens and reacting to every little thing that happens. It's interesting. It is an entire universe in and of itself when it comes to sports media.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that entire New England area has so much going on just in the sports world. There's a lot to cover, and they're always in the mix for playoffs, for anything like that. So yeah, it's huge for sure.
Yeah, it's cool. And there's a, now 1 in 8 chance that you're going to be part of that culture. So moving on into our Elite 8 part of this bracket from the AFC, we have the number 2 Bills, and not next week, but 2 weeks from now, they'll square off against the number 12 New England Patriots in an AFC East showdown for the ages. And then we'll also have the number 10 Jacksonville Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence versus the number 14 Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow, a couple of the young quarterback studs of the league right there. And it's going to be cool to see what happens with all this.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I'm stoked. It's been fun. I like these new questions. Yep. I don't think we got any repeats, which was nice.
Yeah, I think the only repeat maybe was Twitter followers, because we did Twitter followers in one of the first rounds, I think. But if not, then that's cool too. I'm glad we got to talk about some of the new ones. We've got a few other new ones on the list. Maybe we'll get to those next week when we go down the Sweet 16 side of the bracket for the NFC. And we have some pretty interesting matchups lined up for you next week as well. So tune back in.
For sure.
Zach, let's clear the bases this week. We've got a little bit more to talk about in the world of Major League Baseball, and that's the record-setting event that's about to take place in the Hall of Fame, the historic event where Shohei Ohtani is going to be the first player in MLB history. Major League Baseball has been around for 150 years, and this is the first time that it's ever happening. Shohei Ohtani is going to make the All-Star game as a position player, as a DH, and as a pitcher. So our little dream of letting him pitch a couple innings or an inning or whatever in the All-Star game and also hit for himself, it's going to become a reality.
Wild. It's honestly kind of shocking that this hasn't happened before, but I guess that goes to show
how rare he is, how crazy insane it is that he's doing what he's doing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people compare him to Babe Ruth, but I've heard you say it before. I don't think Babe Ruth would be as good as he was in this era of baseball. It's completely different to what he was experiencing. And for Shohei to be able to do what he's doing right now is unremarkable. It's insane. I have no words for it. And we're witnessing something pretty crazy right now. And
history. Yeah.
I mean, it's clear as day for them to put him in the All-Star game as a pitcher and as a DH is wild, because you've got to think of all those other pitchers and hitters and everything that they could have possibly put in there. And they chose this guy for 2 spots, one guy.
Yeah. It shows how valuable of a player that guy is to the Angels, and how he's very easily the most valuable player in the entire league, because not only is he an all-star at 2 positions, he's also leading the league in home runs. He's beating all of the other hitters at being a dominant hitter.
It's insane.
It's insane. 31 bombs before the All-Star. Babe Ruth never did that.
It's just crazy. And hats off to him, man. I definitely didn't think he was going to be able to do that. I thought one or the other would have given him an injury at this point. I don't see how he can do it. How can you go out there and pitch as well as he does? Because he's no slouch out there. He's
gotten roughed up, just like all pitchers. Eventually they have their crappy outings.
Sure.
But for the most part, he's been good. He's been an all-star level pitcher this year.
Yeah, it's nuts. And then he goes out there and hits 30 bombs. That's just
insane.
Gnarly. Yeah. I hope he's not some sort of robot or something, because that is just insane.
I mean, he's not human. What he's doing is not feasible for a human to do, but it does make those of us that declared him the MVP to start the season, it makes us look pretty smart, because what he's doing is what? Has anybody ever been more valuable?
No, absolutely not. There's no possible way. And you're starting to see a lot more people talk about that now, but it's convenient to do that now when the writing is on the wall. But that was a good call of yours. And I definitely was skeptical of it when you first came out. And I was like, oh, well, this is kind of a bit of a hot take, because I was on the train of he's going to get injured and it's not going to work and he's going to have to pick one or the other. But at least so far this season, up to the All-Star break, which is a significant amount of time, he's been able to do both very well.
Yep, absolutely. He's been dominant for the most part. Like you said, his WAR right now is a 5.2. Pretty good for Shohei Ohtani. And I'm glad that I made that call. Another thing that we kind of need to talk about, we not address at least, is Garrett Cole is going to also represent the American League as an all-star. And it's not because he's, been lighting up the radar gun. It's not because he's been doing a lot recently. He's going to be an all-star based on the first half of a season, where he was out there and he was dominant. He started his first 6 games with a 5-1 record, throwing 52 2/3 innings, and had a 1.37 ERA. He was kicking everyone's butt that he saw. And then since the MLB started announcing that they were going to crack down on sticky stuff and that they were going to be coming after pitchers that are using it, Cole has a record in those 6 games of 3-3, and he's pitched somewhere around the same number of innings. He had 52 2/3 before, 52 1/3 after. So pretty good basis of comparison. After he's got a 4.47 ERA. That's 3 full runs over what he was doing in the first half of the season. And his strikeouts per 9 has dropped to a 9.8 from a 13.3. So he has less active stuff. He's performing at a much less than role than he was before. He was a Cy winning ace of the New York Yankees in the first 6 games of the season. The last 6, he's been very, very mediocre.
Absolutely. He is the sticky stuff pitcher, if there ever was one. Obviously, across the league, you've seen spin rate and all that kind of stuff go down, but I think he is one of the top guys that has had his numbers affected due to this substance ban. And
he's by far the worst offender of all of this stuff, in my opinion.
And I think it's clear to see that he 100% relied on that stuff for him to be as good of a pitcher as he was. Now we see what he's like without that stuff. And I get it. He should probably be allowed to use something, because we've gone over it. The balls are insanely slick. You need a little something to get a grip on it. But I think from his numbers before to now is a clear indication that most of his talent, most of his skill, whatever you want to call it, was from that sticky stuff. It wasn't necessarily him putting that on the ball. It wasn't his ability to throw the ball that was doing it. It was the use of sticky stuff that gave him that nasty stuff that he used. And he's just not going to be the same pitcher without that stuff.
So now the New York Yankees are on the hook to pay him a couple $100 million or whatever his contract is worth. And he's not even that great of a pitcher without the substance. So you got to be feeling a little bit of buyer's remorse if you're a New York Yankees fan, because I remember everybody being so hyped that they got the Garrett Cole acquisition, that they were going to be able to be solid for years to come because of this acquisition. Now he's just going to be a detriment to the entire team, and he's going to be an albatross on that salary.
Oh yeah, 100%. I wonder if they're going to try, and I'm sure it'll be a very tall order, but I wonder if they're going to try to offload him eventually. I think he'll be fine this year, but next year, if he has a whole year of this just mediocre 4+ ERA stuff, they're not going to want to pay him all that money. And
no, but who's going to take him?
Like I said, it's going to be hard to offload him with that giant contract, but boy.
Wow, I guess we'll see. We'll definitely be paying attention to that. Do you have anything else you want to clear the bases with, Zach?
No, I think we're good. I'm looking forward to, I believe it's this Saturday, the Poirier-McGregor 3 fight. So we'll obviously be covering that on Monday's show. That'll be a big one. And that'll basically finish out their trilogy and see who the better man is on that one. I hope it's a good, clean fight. I hope nothing stupid happens, some stupid, medical stoppage or whatever. I hope it's a good, definitive fight so we can just move on. I'm honestly kind of getting sick of the McGregor train. I think that train has left the station and it's over. So hopefully this is the definitive, end to that, and we can just get on with our lives. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to watching more baseball, obviously. So we'll be ready to talk about some UFC. I feel like it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while since we have talked about the UFC, so it will be good to get back into the pocket talking about that a little bit. And we'll be back next week to talk about which NFC teams we're going to eliminate and move on for your ultimate pick.
Yes, sir.
Of a new NFL team. So the matchups next week, they're going to be fun. They're going to be good. We've got some NFC North rivals clashing. We've got the football team ready to take it to the team from New Orleans, and we've got a bunch of good stuff coming up for you next week. So be sure you tune back in live next Monday night on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. We've got the live stream going on all three, so make sure you check out one of them. And if you're on the go, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast. That's, chances are we're there. So check us out, and we'll be back live next week. See you then. Peace.